some of the things to expect when it comes to this upcoming year's room selection and reapplication process. So we'll go ahead and dive right on in. So first thing to share with you all is when it comes to living on campus for next academic year, as many of you probably know, all of our first and second year students are required to live on campus. That being said, after that process takes place, there are still quite a few spaces that are going to be available for our interested rising juniors and seniors in our campus housing options. And we'll talk a little bit shortly about what those options look like. Next piece to be aware of is that all of our students that are going to be going through that housing selection process or that room selection process must complete an application using our online housing portal. And so we'll talk in just a minute or two about when that process will take place and so on, but that is one important piece that all students need to be aware of. So before we get into the logistics of it, we thought we might take a minute or two and just reinforce and remind you all some of the benefits to living on campus. And the reality is we have a lot of experience and a lot of research really that shows that students who choose to live on campus, not only are they more satisfied with their overall academic and college university experience, but there's a lot of research also that shows that they also perform better academically. A big part of that is that living on campus really allows our students to stay in close proximity to so many of the important academic resources that the university has to offer. All of those support mechanisms and support networks are really at students' fingertips. And then certainly in housing and residence life, we certainly spend a lot of time building community and trying to provide really strong social opportunities and connections for students to engage through their residential experience. Additionally, campus housing has security features that that we find to be very important, such as the staff that we have that are on site, secured exterior access, closed-circuit TV cameras, and really a number of different aspects of safety and security that you might not see in some of the off-campus rentals in the area. And so truly that is another strong reason why we encourage students to live on campus. And then finally, we have housing and residence life staff in all of our buildings on campus to certainly provide support and promote success for all of our residential students.
And going into the application process, there's really three important phases to the reapplication process for housing. One is really having your student investigate all their options, either by attending housing expositions or presentations that we're going to have for all the students, attending roommate matching events to kind of figure out who they want to be living with next year, talking with their roommates and friends about what their housing options are. Do they want to try and go for an apartment? Do they want to suite together? Do they, do they want to try and go off campus or stay on? They really need to be talking with their friends about kind of where they want to go together. The second part of this is completing the housing application and the housing agreement. The housing agreement is a part of the housing application. It's kind of the end of them telling us, yes, I want to come to campus. I want to stay on campus for the upcoming year. And that's a good gauging point for us to know how many students we're going to have living on campus for the upcoming year. The third part of this is, so after they've completed their application and told us that they want to return to campus next year, they'll go through a room selection process. And the room selection process will involve them receiving a time slot in which they will be able to pick a room through the online housing portal. The other piece of all of this is investigating their options, and some ways that you as a parent can actually help support your student through this is really to help them. They need to be paying attention to the emails from Housing and Residence Life, referring them to information that we're going to have online. We do have a new website coming online for room selection this year that will have a lot of new information on it. That'll be ready to go at the beginning of January. So we really want students to pay attention to the information we're posting there. There will be videos there and a lot of communications coming from email. Encourage your student to attend the housing presentations to learn more about their options. So the housing presentations will also include an expo, which is an open house that we actually host, so that especially first-year students, rising sophomores that are going to be going through the process that may not have been in some of our upperclassmen housing communities can go and look and see kind of what do these communities look like? Can I see myself living here next year? The housing presentations really have a large focus on frequently asked questions. So we can actually kind of take questions from the audience because we find that a lot of students have questions about, like, what are my chances of getting a single in, in mayor or something like that, They're really looking for kind of some of those percentages and, some of those options and how they can plan to try and get into a certain environment that they want to live in and find the right fit for them. And the housing staff is all there to actually answer those questions. Help your student consider their needs and weigh their options. There are some realities with room selection. We do have a finite number of rooms on campus. Not every student can get an Irby 8-person suite. So we want to make sure that students are being realistic and that they not only understand what their needs are with housing, but they're not just looking at one option. They're looking at a few different potential options that would work for them. We want you guys to actually have a conversation about room rates and discuss options with your student. They'll be available, the upcoming 2017-18 room rates will be available on our website at the start of the spring semester. But currently we have our current rates are up there. But actually having that conversation with your student about money and what's realistic for them. And then if your student is having any doubts or any questions or feeling uncomfortable about anything, please encourage them to come and talk to our staff. We are happy to talk to any student that is having questions or confused about part of the process. We know that this can be stressful for students, and we want to alleviate that as much as possible.
Great. So we'll take a few minutes and just talk very briefly about some of the housing options that we're going to have available for our returning students next year. As many of you know, we've spent in Housing and Residence Life here at Tulane a lot of time and energy these past couple of years in really thinking about our living learning communities. And our residential learning communities, essentially what they do is they offer vibrant learning experiences that are really unique to each student. And then really trying to collectively emphasize shared interests in a common living experience in a common living environment. And so we've really placed a lot of time and energy in really developing these programs. And so when it comes to room selection, our residential learning communities round will happen pretty early on in the process. And so there are a number of different options that your students may be interested in exploring when it comes to room selection for next year in one of our RLCs. And I'll kind of walk through those just very briefly. The first one is in Weatherhead Hall. This is an upper class community. It's a suite style facility in double and single rooms. Patterson is the home of our Changemaker community and also in a suite style facility that's both double and single rooms available. Greenbaum, which is one of our newer facilities, is also the home of our Get Engaged residential learning community. It's another one of our suite style buildings, and there are both double and single rooms available to students. Warren has actually two of our new upcoming residential learning communities for next year called Kaleidoscope, and then there's another one called Shapers, and those are both new to our program, and I'll refer you to our website to take a look and learn a little bit about what all of these residential learning communities are all about programmatically. But those two are going to be new next year in Warren, both in doubles and single rooms. That building's organized and set up a little bit differently in that they're not suite style, but they're community bathrooms or shared bathrooms with the community. That process, if a student is interested or your student's interested in applying to be part of one of the RLCs, those applications are going to be part of that online housing application that Elaine was talking about a minute ago. Those applications are going to be available and open on January 30th, and then they're due on February 10th of next year. So that process will run at the very beginning of our housing selection process. Subsequent to that, I'll talk a little bit about more of our traditional housing or other residence hall spaces that are available for next year for upper class students. The first two I'll mention are both Phelps and Irby. These are basically identical buildings that are suite-style facilities. There are 8 students that will share one suite in 4 double rooms, and so they're organized with a bathroom right in the center of the suite. Greenbaum, as I mentioned earlier, also has space in it that's not part of our residential learning community, and they're, again, suite style. Mayer, which sits right at the corner of McAllister and Drill Road, is one of our suite style buildings. Again, we have doubles and singles available for our returning students. Warren, again, has space available for upper class students, again, in our community bathrooms layout. And then Willow, which sits right along Janet Yeoman Way and is a suite-style facility with doubles and singles. There are actually also some townhouses available in that community as well. That process will run and open beginning on February 13th and run through February 24th of next year. Additionally, right in that same time frame, we're also going to be looking at the housing for our apartment-style community. Aaron Residences is our apartment-style facility that does sit on campus, and it really is designed for juniors and seniors predominantly. And these apartments are great. They have double and single rooms, they have living rooms, a bathroom, and a small kitchen for the students who are living in those communities. And there are 3, 4, and 5-person apartments available. All of the utilities are included in these apartments, so the electricity, the water, cable, internet are all included in the room rate, and all of the units are fully furnished, both in the bedrooms and in the living rooms as well. And so that housing for Aaron Residences will occur at the same time as our other traditional housing as well. So as we mentioned earlier, we really wanted to give students the opportunity to learn and explore and really get a feel for the different housing options that might be available to them going into next year. And as Elaine mentioned earlier, we are going to have a housing expo, and that's one way really for students to get the opportunity to experience a little bit about what these facilities are all about. It's an open house style event. Students can come and visit a number of our different housing options and styles in the residence halls, and we would really encourage for you to encourage your students to take advantage of those. And then again, we're going to spend a lot of time this January and February going through and offering a number of different presentations directly to students to really explain the process. So there's certainly that we want them to understand their options, but then understanding how the application works and how the room selection works and so on. And really, we're working very hard to make sure that this is a very intuitive process, but it really makes a big difference if students can come in and spend just a few minutes with us at one of these presentations and understand exactly how it all works. We'd be happy to answer any questions that they might have and offer as much advice as we possibly can.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more in depth about what the housing process calendar looks like, timeline, and actually get into a little bit of the details about the housing application process and what room selection involves. I want you to know that all of the advertising and everything for room selection is slated to go out at the start of the spring semester. So when your student arrives back in the spring, we are going to have all of our materials out there. Our website is going to be up to date, very focused on room selection and the housing application process. The rates are going to be up at that point. We're going to have a booklet, all of the just about the process, so it can actually walk a student through it as they're selecting a room. And all of the housing presentations and the expo and everything is going to be advertised at that point. So we're really planning a very tight marketing campaign to really kind of hit off at the start of the spring semester. Specifically, as Tim was talking about the different application processes, so we have the residential learning communities and our traditional and our housing apartment dates. So the residential learning communities, that application will open up on January 30th. The application will be due on February 10th. By February 23rd, we're going to have time slots issued out to all students accepted into a residential learning community. So as Tim was talking about, this is an application process. There are essays for students that are extra because the residential learning communities are looking for students that are going to be engaged in that theme and really focused in on wanting to live in that environment. And they're looking for people that are excited about it. So there's a little bit extra that goes on with that. So that's why that's why that application starts so much earlier, because it has a bit of a longer process for students to get accepted into a residential learning community. After they receive their time slot, the time slot will be perfected for a time on either March 9th or March 10th. So those are the 2 dates that anyone accepted into an RLC will select a room. Traditional apartment housing dates, those applications open up on February 13th. They'll be due on February 24th, just before Mardi Gras. And then on March 6th afterwards, we have this nicely timed around Mardi Gras. On March 6th, we'll issue time slots to all of the students that have completed applications, and then depending on the student's class year, room selection for them will be between March 14th and March 24th. So seniors will pick earlier than juniors, juniors will pick earlier than sophomores, and all of those dates, all of those time slots will fall in that range of dates. So, the housing application process. All students who plan to live on campus must submit an application and a housing agreement for 2017-2018. Essentially, for us, that means if a student fills out the housing application and agreement, that's telling me that they want a time slot, and they want to be issued a time slot in which to go through room selection. So that's the big indicator for us. Having that application complete allows them to be able to see the different rooms that are available for the upcoming year and select one and reserve it for the next year. Completion of an application and a housing agreement, well, I just said that. HRL will assign, basically after they fill that out, we'll assign them a room selection time slot, email that out to them, and they're good. So due to the new housing process, we have been making a lot of changes. So we have a new housing system that came on last year with us. We unveiled this process during last year's room selection and basically improved upon it this year. So there's been a lot of things that we've been focusing in on. We did some surveys after room selection last year that gave us some ideas on improvements and things that we could have improved upon for the upcoming room selection. So we've been working pretty diligently on that most of the fall, and are set to go for this upcoming room selection. As I said before, information will be made available at the start of the spring semester on our website and emailed out to the students. To be eligible for housing. So housing is open to all students who currently reside on campus. If you have a student that is off campus right now and interested in coming back onto campus, please have them contact our office, and we'll help them be able to get through that process. But traditionally speaking, it's been students that live on campus that are invited to return back to campus. And a lot of the reason behind that is if a student has gone off campus, we've likely returned their housing deposit back to them at that point. So we've kind of just released them from any requirement to live on campus or any interest in living on campus. So if you have a student that is interested in just returning to us that has been off, please just have them contact us, and we're happy to add them to our communications list. Students who are currently on leave of absence or are abroad and on exchange are eligible to participate in the housing process. Because it is an online process this year, they can pretty much log in from anywhere in the world and do it. I mean, it will be central time zone based, but they can log in anywhere in the world during their time slot and select a room, log in anywhere in the world to complete the housing application, sign the agreement, all of that kind of stuff. And they can still talk with their friends while they're doing this. So if they're planning on kind of grouping up and getting a suite or an apartment with some friends, they can still do that and be a part of the process, which is one of the things that I think excites us most about this online process. students who will be returning from leave of absence or exchange that aren't returning until the spring semester, those students will actually be able to go through an application process, but that won't happen until November or December. For the most part, some students at this point in time, if they know they're going abroad in the fall and they're not going to be back in the spring, they don't know what their housing plans really are going to be for the spring at this point. So we give them a little bit more leeway and a little bit more time to kind of think that out. And as they are looking at returning to Tulane, then we send them out an application process, and they can give us some housing preferences, and we'll look at the available rooms and try and get them housing. And we're actually going through that process for the students returning in spring right now. So, and it seems to be going pretty well. Due to our new system, the housing application agreement and room selection can be all completed online. And that's really what does allow our leave of absence and students that are abroad to fully participate in the process while remote. Room selection. So a little bit about room selection. So that after they've gotten their time slot and everything, their time slots are based on their class year. So it's the rising senior class, the rising junior class, and the rising sophomore class. Class status is determined by their years on campus. It's not determined by their credit hours. And the reason why it's based on years on campus is, I mean, one, it's a little more fair for us, and it's something that's a little bit more easily calculatable for us, since we don't always know all of their academics and all their credit hours and that kind of stuff. So we look at how many years they've been on campus, so the year they were admitted to Tulane, basically. This is also a way for like students who have gone abroad, who like spent some time away from Tulane, either from a leave of absence or abroad. There's no penalty for that either. A student who's taken a year off from campus, I don't want them to not live with their you know, the class year that they came in with. I want them to be able to, they still have friends in that class year, and they should be able to participate in room selection with them. So that's really the driving force around that. Each student will receive a time slot, at which time they will be able to select a room. So the time slot is essentially like, this is the date, the time in which you can actually see what rooms are available and actually physically pick a room in the online system. They are randomly assigned to each student. So time slots, this is really important to understand. So all the students that have filled out their housing application and agreement, we divide them up by class year, and we basically just kind of throw them at the computer system, which determines their time slot. It is not based on when they completed their housing application. It is not based really on anything except for complete randomness. And we try to do that because it's really fair. We don't want any criteria really associated with it. So students are able also to group with their friends to secure double room suites or apartments. So another really great feature with the new system is that it does allow students to kind of group up in the computer and all pick a room together. So there's a group leader that's in charge that makes sure that everyone has done what they need to do, and they're the ones that actually go in and kind of pick the room for everybody. So we try to encourage the group to be together during room selection and all of that kind of stuff. But that's a really cool feature, and they can kind of readjust themselves based on what's available. Once they get into their time slot, they can see what's available, and if they need to add another person or someone, they need to split up as a group of, you know, 2 twos instead of a group of 4, you know, they can actually do that. So some of the other things with room selection, students will assign themselves into a room during their time slot. If a student is interested in selecting a double room suite or apartment with their friends, they may create a group and then we'll select that together. We advise that the student with the earliest time slot is the one that's the group leader, just because you want to have that advantage. So we don't actually allow grouping in the system until after we issue time slots. So after the time slot is issued, students will be able to go into the system and create groups together, play around with the system just to make sure they're really comfortable with like adding people, taking people away from a group, verifying a group, that kind of thing. So the grouping process can sometimes be a little stressful for students. So we are going to have some really clear directions about that goes out. Groups can be pretty much any size up to 8, and that's our largest suite in Irby and Phelps, so we allow any group size up to 8. They can only select like a room or a suite or an apartment together. They can't select like 3 rooms in a row on a floor. So it's really clear kind of what they can actually select together as a group. So it's really just an apartment, a full suite, or a room and a suite. So please note that the suites and apartments do need to be filled to capacity by the end of room selection. So we really want students, like if they're looking at getting an apartment together, we want 5 students to pick a 5-bedroom apartment. We don't want 4 students to pick a 5-bedroom apartment and then there'd be this one stray room in there, because they're going to end up with a stranger in there. And that can be really uncomfortable, not only for that group of 4, but also that student that's just been assigned to that room too. So we really encourage students to completely fill their suite or apartment if they're doing grouping and looking to go through that process.
So as we start to wind down, the last couple comments I'll make is really, this process is definitely something that we know it can be stressful, it can be a little intimidating for students if they've never been through it before, but I just want to really reinforce that our staff is going to be there at every step of the way. We're going to, again, advertise, we're going to email your students, we're going to have presentations in the halls and bulletin boards and so many different ways that we're going to get the word out to really make sure that we can answer any questions that they have and make sure that they really understand all that the process entails. And before we know it, March will be here, and we will have completed the process, and it'll all be done. So so really we're really ready to answer any questions that you all might have. Penny, I might hand it back over to you.
Okay, so we have a couple of people who have already typed in a couple of questions, and the first 2 are sort of similar. How does a student register for January 2018 after spending the fall semester 2017 in Europe? And so the next person's question is the same. Like if they're going abroad the first semester, what are their options? Can they choose their room and roommates? How would all that work?
Yes, they actually can do that. So that's a process we run we're actually currently running that process right now. It's run in November, December. It's the same housing portal that they'll use for room selection. They won't go through a room selection process necessarily just because we don't know what rooms are available until pretty much we're in the middle of the application process. We're still figuring out, okay, who is going abroad? Who is taking a leave from campus? So we're actually we've just now gotten those rooms. We're solid on those rooms, and we're making assignments for the students coming back for spring. So yes, they can request a room preference, and they can request a roommate. We also allow students to tell us in the housing application, so if they know they have a friend coming, or if they know they have a friend that's going abroad and they want to replace them in that room, they can tell us, like, okay, they can tell us I want to live in this room, and we'll see if it's available. So we make no promises, because sometimes we have students that either change their mind, we're not quite sure on, haven't filled out a cancellation process, but we always have those conversations with those students.
So if I'm there in the fall and I think I'm going to do an internship in DC for the spring, and you're away for the fall, and you know that I'm leaving, you could request my room.
Yes.
And once you confirm that I actually am going to DC,
yes,
then you can make that assignment. Okay. So the next question is about a rumor. My freshman son heard a rumor that sophomores might be allowed to live off campus. Is this true?
That is absolutely not true.
It is not true.
It is not. We know that we have a very large current first-year class, and I think that that's where some of those rumors started. But no, we're absolutely prepared for all of our rising first and second year students, and we still anticipate that we will have space available for rising juniors and seniors as well.
So the next question is, do you have a rough estimate of how many juniors or seniors live on campus?
I think around 300. Yeah, it's around 300.
300 to 400, I believe. Yeah, currently.
So the next question was, I came in late. Is it possible to get the PowerPoint emailed to you? And yes, I will be sending this probably tomorrow. By midday, if I wait until then, I might also have the link for the complete video. So expect it in your email box tomorrow. The next question is it difficult to get a single in a residential learning community?
It depends on if there's singles available in that residential community. So some of them have more than others. Some don't have any at all. So it really depends on what residential community they're looking at. And we're talking about residential learning.
Yeah, RLC.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And some of those RLCs have upper class students. So if an upper class student wants to stay there, and like if they have a single now, they would be able to retain that room.
No, we don't do squatting.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there is no squatting.
Okay.
But they can certainly apply for it.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And would that be the kind of thing they would find out when they go to the expos and stuff? They'd kind of get a sense of whether this building has singles and that kind of
and that's actually a lot of the point of those, is so we can really talk about realities and that kind of thing.
So it is real important for the students to go to those presentations that they'll have. The next question is, can sophomores get singles?
Yeah.
Is it
if they're available.
If they're available.
No,
so they're not precluded from having a single, but it is all based on availability.
Yes. Because they're the last to pick, sometimes there aren't many available at the end.
Okay.
So, but it
is a possibility.
It's a possibility.
So the next question is, it's perhaps off topic, but what is the housing arrangement for fraternities and sororities? So Tulane does not govern the fraternity and sorority houses. Most of them at Tulane, though, are not large enough to house a lot of students. In some of the sororities, in fact, there may only be like the major officers of the sororities who live there, so they're just not really designed. They are typical kind of uptown neighborhood houses that have been converted into fraternity and sorority houses, so they don't have a whole lot of bedroom spaces. So whereas there might be other schools where the fraternity or sorority houses were designed to be, living spaces, these don't have that many options within them. Let's see here. Next question is, let's see, if they're going abroad in fall 17 and complete the housing app in November, are they obligated to live on campus in on-campus housing? Let's see, going
for
abroad.
the spring.
Yeah, are they obligated to live on campus for the spring? So once they submit an application and they get an assignment, they're obligated?
Yes, I mean, our hope is that students have given some thought as to whether or not they want to live on campus when they go ahead and fill out that housing agreement. And so once they've completed that, our terms and conditions or our contract will be a part of that, and you'll see kind of what those terms are. But yes, absolutely, if you're filling out that agreement, our expectation is that you would be living on campus for that spring semester.
So there are a couple of questions about triples. Are 3 students having to fit into rooms intended for 2 students? There are freshmen and forced triples. Will there be triples for sophomores?
That is not our intention by any stretch of it. Oh, a little louder. No, there's not going to be triple rooms. Unless it's a natural triple, it will not exist. And actually, there's no natural triples for upperclassmen housing anyways. So, no.
Yeah, 3-person apartments in Aaron, but not triple rooms in the upper class areas. Let's see. Are there only 8-person suites available in Phelps and Irby?
Not for next week. The majority of all the suites in Irby and Phelps are 8-person suites. There are, I'll call them 6-person suites, but 2 of the people of those 6 are actually the RAs. So the ones that aren't 8-person suites are the staff suites. So there's 2 RAs in there, and then there'll be an opportunity for 4 other students to pick the 2 double rooms in that suite as well.
So that would be about 3 in Irby and 3 in Phelps that are arranged that way. 4.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
It depends if it's Irby or Phelps.
Yeah.
So.
And let's see here. The next question is about what percentage of sophomores live in singles. I think that's probably hard to judge at this point.
Yeah, that's really hard.
Again, since the rising seniors and rising juniors get a chance to apply, get a chance to be assigned first, then it may be trickier for a sophomore to get a single just because they're going to be that last wave of people assigned to those.
Exactly.
Let's see. Another question is about the RA process, the RA application process. So how does that work? And can sophomores be selected as RAs?
Yeah, sure. So we actually have just opened our resident advisor application process, and students who are interested in applying for that position can begin to do so now. The applications are due early next semester, so if your student is thinking about doing that and going through that process, we would encourage them to start that application early. Sorry, Penny, what was the second half of that question?
Can sophomores be selected as RAs?
Yes, they can. So our aim is, I'll phrase it this way, we are giving preference to those students who are going to be juniors or seniors next year, but sophomores are absolutely eligible to apply and would certainly be considered through the application process.
Okay. The next question is, our first year student is in the Wall Honors Residence Hall. How will she handle housing if she's still in honors next year?
She would apply for the residential learning community for honors, which is housed in Weatherhead.
Okay, so Weatherhead is her option for the honors community. Let's see, next question. I think it's just to clarify earlier. So here's how it's phrased. So if a student is going abroad in the fall of 2017, her housing application will be in November and December of 2017. She doesn't have to bother with this upcoming process, correct?
Absolutely not.
So that's correct. So you have that correct. So the next one, what happens if a student doesn't get housing, get an assignment with his or her friends?
There is always a room change process. So at the end of room selection, there will be, so spring break will be afterwards. We kind of let the dust settle with spring break. In April, we'll have like a mini room change process where students that, didn't exactly get their first preference or maybe didn't get with their friends or something like that. Because there's always students that don't get exactly what they want in room selection. We do take room change forms at that point. And it's not that they'll get a room change immediately. We have those room changes those forms and requests that we look at throughout the course of the summer. If we can make that happen over the course of the summer with people taking leaves or things like that, we try to make those changes. We can't guarantee that the change will actually happen, but we try and make it happen. In all honesty, we want this to be a successful process, and if there's a way for us to make that happen, we'll try. So
I might just add a couple things in addition. And first of all, the reality is the way our process is built, it's built around students being able to group together with their friends, right? So the vast majority of the students who go through this process are assigned with the students with whom they've chosen to live. So that is one piece of it. The other piece is, as they're going through this process, we really do encourage your student to have open communication with their potential roommates and talking about the types of housing that they're interested in and so on and so forth, so that when room selection actually happens, that everybody's on the same page with what it is that they're interested in, where they're willing to live, and so on, as opposed to at the last minute somebody making changing their mind because they didn't talk through what they were really what they valued when it comes to housing. So that open communication is definitely something that I'd encourage you all as parents to talk with your students about doing with their roommates.
And just to add on to some of that, I think one of the saddest things I've actually seen with students is they didn't plan for kind of a plan B or a plan C sometimes. So when push comes to shove, that group, if they're, a great example here would be we're an 8-person group and we're really focused on Irby or Phelps and there's nothing left in Irby and Phelps, who gets dropped out of that group? Because there's no other 8-person scenarios. So it's actually having those conversations of what if we don't get Irby and Phelps? Do we group up? Do we break up into 2 different groups of 4 to try and get something else? There should be some strategy that happens around some.
Do we all have the same second choice building?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that we value being together.
Right.
Even if we're not in a suite together, we're in a different residence hall all together.
Yeah. I don't want to see friendships die because of this. So.
Okay. The next question is, what does a suite actually entail? So most of our suites are rooms that are adjoined by a bathroom, correct?
Yep.
So when we say that 8-person suite, that means that's 8 people sharing a bath, but those are larger baths than, like there's multiple
Typically.
shower stalls
In most cases.
in most cases.
Yes.
There are also suites in some of the other buildings that are a single adjoined to a double or 2 doubles together, and in some cases 2 singles next to each other that share a bath.
Right.
So my daughter's in the, let's see, I think we answered that one. Oh, my daughter's in the freshman honors dorm. Will she be able to get into the sophomore honors hall automatically as long as she is in the honors program?
That is an excellent question. That might be a question that we might have to get back with you on it. Your daughter would definitely need to apply for that residential learning community to be eligible to live in Weatherhead then their sophomore year. But that's
So it doesn't mean
really,
that if she knows she's in honors, she doesn't even have to submit an application.
No, she needs to go through the process.
She has to do an application and go through the process.
Exactly. In all cases, yes.
Let's see. Our daughter's applied to be an RA. Would she still select a room in case she doesn't get the position, or would she know in time the outcome of the RA process so that she'd have time to apply, submit her room application?
We do actually a lot of strategizing around the timeline of RA selection and the timeline of room selection, so that before room selection, we know who the RAs are and actually remove them out. Like, we always encourage, whether you've applied to be an RA or not, like, yes, definitely apply for room selection.
Right.
We'll know exactly who the RAs are and email you and remove you out of the room selection process. We basically just kind of cancel out your application because you're going to be an RA. So, but we definitely tell students to definitely apply, sign your agreement, the whole 9 yards, just in case.
I mean, the reality is the RA position is a competitive process. So I would encourage all students, as Elaine said, to assume that you're not going to get the position. Not that your sons and daughters aren't wonderful, but the reality is, you want to make sure that you have your housing taken care of. So assume you're not going to get the RA position, but then yes, we would cancel that contract if they do get the RA position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see. So next question is, will Newcomb scholars be considered for inclusion within the sophomore honors housing? The women who've been selected for Newcomb scholars, are they considered that same honors program? I don't know that that's the same, that's considered the same way. We will, think that's a different program. We can find out more in the email to you. We can, when you submit your questions, your email address is attached to it, so we can note people we may have to get back to. So thank you for that question. We'll do some more investigating. But our first thought is that, no, those are separate programs. The Newcomb Scholars Program is a completely separate competitive process that's different from the honors program. Does a first-year student currently in an RLC follow the same application process to live in an RLC their sophomore year? Like they have to reapply?
Yes.
If there's essays involved and those kind of things, they still have to submit those. There's
correct.
So the same process.
Yep.
So they do have to do that again. Next question is, how many suites are there in Phelps or Irby? And the related question is, in Phelps and Irby, do the students pick all 8, or is it split 4 and 4? So all total in Phelps and Irby, there's about
200 students.
200
that
students
live in each building, approximately.
Well, there's 220 students roughly.
Right.
Yeah.
But don't just divide that by 8, because we do have the RA suites in there and so on. But approximately 200 students, suites for students are available in each of those 2 buildings. But we do assign them as the full group of 8. So the students will apply as a group of 8 for those locations, not 4 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
So are you more likely to fill those 6-person ones that are attached to the RAs as doubles, independent doubles?
No, a group. So how the system works is it looks at the size of the group and matches it to the size of the suite. Okay. So the RA rooms are actually purposefully taken out of, because we don't want anyone selecting an RA room. So that would actually be the perfect group of 4 would be able to select that because it's a matched amount.
Okay.
So that's what the system looks at. It looks at size of group, amount of beds available in that suite, and that suite is all kind of tied together. So.
Okay, so what happens if a student, these two next questions are really sort of related. What happens if a student determines to take a leave after the completion of room selection? Or the next question is, since the study abroad application process for fall 2017 hasn't been confirmed yet, hasn't taken place, what happens if they don't go abroad in 2017 and they didn't put a housing application in this year?
If they're worried about that, I would encourage them to put in a housing application anyways. Because if they go abroad, we're going to be told about that. And actually, we reach out to those offices to actually make sure that we're good. We also cross-reference whether a student is registered or not in the summer. So
if they took a leave of absence, like a medical leave of absence or something else, and they weren't actually enrolled in school here, then that would cancel their housing contract, or they still have to.
We still expect someone to fill out a cancellation.
Okay, so they have to fill out a cancellation that shows that they are officially taking a leave.
Yes.
So it'd be the same in the case of a leave to go abroad.
Going abroad,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that, as long as they go through that, go through that hoop and fill out that paperwork, then that.
Yeah.
And my big takeaway there too is when your student completes the housing agreement and goes through and looks at our terms and our conditions, we do encourage them to make sure that they take a look at it, or maybe you could ask them to see it as well, what those terms and conditions are specifically around cancellations, because we spell out very clearly how that cancellation process works with dates and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Was there a determination if an honors freshman is automatically placed in Weatherhead if they request that on their application? So can Weatherhead house all the current honor students? I mean, I guess the question is there a chance that someone could request Weatherhead, but there might not be enough spaces?
I think that would be there's a faculty committee that determines, like, everyone that gets into that, and that's for all of the RLCs. So there is a group. So those essays that are written for the RLCs and everything all go before a committee of people that decide on who gets in.
I don't anticipate, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but just thinking about numbers, I don't anticipate that that's going to be a problem for next year, though, for those students who are interested in that. But again, it's more about tied to that application.
Who will become juniors, who then may decide to live off campus or move to some other building or something.
Right. But yes, exactly.
If we didn't get at your question just right, please type in another way to ask that question. So another person has asked, is an RA's roommate ever able to live with the RA? Like an RA's current roommate, or I guess a new RA trainee who would be an RA next year. The RAs do not have roommates. Yeah, so in our system, the RAs do not have roommates. And that's really for the benefit of a roommate, so that they're not kind of having that extra traffic to the room and attention, and to be, the RAs sometimes have to be the people who respond to things in the middle of the night and that kind of thing. So it's not all that convenient for someone to live with them, actually. Let's see. Can you speak to the focus for the new Kaleidoscope and Shapers RLCs? Can you elaborate on those a bit?
Yeah, I mean, just really briefly, and there's going to be a lot, we're working on finishing up some marketing materials too that are going to be available on our website, but basically the Kaleidoscope RLC is being done in partnership with our staff at the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and developing really a community that focuses around inclusivity, diversity, and social justice, and we expect there to be some strong programming around those areas in that community in Warren. Shapers, I think, was the other one that you'd asked about, and is a very interesting interdisciplinary group of folks that are really focused on pulling together students who all shape or make things, right? So these are folks who are maybe architects, maybe they're artists and sculptors, it may be costume design, anybody who might make something physically, to come together and have a living learning experience where you can sort of integrate that academic physical experience with their living and learning, or with their residential experience. So we continue to flesh that out, but we're excited about both of those new programs.
And also, when you're the first group of students in the first year of one of those programs, you can no pun intended, get to shape the program a lot. And so the whole one of the important elements of living in an RLC is that those students are really engaged in creating that community. Absolutely. And so they help determine what the programs will be and kind of elaborate on the focus themselves. So if that sounds like the kind of thing that your student would appreciate and want to invest in, then that's something for them to really consider. So we've got several really cool new topics coming on board, so make sure that they consider some of those. So the next question is the campus meal plan optional for juniors or seniors living in the Aaron apartments, or is the meal plan optional for all juniors and seniors? And so
I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I need to reference that with dining.
I don't think it's required for juniors and seniors.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's only required for first years and sophomores. We're pretty sure. Well, when I send you the follow-up email, we'll clarify that. I do know that I have heard from some parents and students that even though they might be living off campus in an apartment or in the Aaron apartments where they have a kitchen, sometimes they'll still get a limited meal plan just so that they have the convenience of being able to do that, not having to cook every meal or, bring along, lunch with them when they're going to be in another part of campus or something. So we'll clarify that and include it in the follow-up email.
Another thing to actually add on to that is that at no part of the housing application does a student sign up for a meal plan. So that it is a separate process.
Sign-up process.
Yep.
Okay, so next question is, as a rising sophomore, are you still able to be randomly matched to a roommate?
Well, I mean, if you pick a room and then someone else picks the other room, that's basically the randomization of that. But we do have some roommate matching kind of events that the hall directors are going to be putting on in the different first-year halls, so that if there's people out there that don't know who they want to live with, they'll have an opportunity to meet some people ahead of time. They can search for roommates. So it's not just about creating a group. They can actually search for people and see and match themselves up and kind of invite them. So it's a little different than the first year application. So
though, if they don't know of somebody and if they're not precluded from applying, if they're just a single going in as a one person.
Oh no, absolutely
and
not.
then
They don't have.
You all will assign somebody else to that room.
Well, someone else will assign themselves to that group.
Okay.
Which the good thing on this is they can actually see the profile, so they can look at a room that's available. If there's someone in the other half of that room, say it's a double room, they can pull up the profile of that person that's already selected that half of the room and see kind of what they're all about and how good of a match are we going to be and that kind of thing. So
what kinds of things are in the profile?
So what time do you get up, go to bed? Do you want the room social? Do you want it to be a study space? Are you messy? Are you neat? All those kind of things.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so the next question is, can a non-honors program student apply to live in the honors RLC?
I don't, there's nothing stopping them, but I think honors would.
I don't know that they would be eligible to participate in the honors RLC if they're not part of the honors program. Now, there very well may be spaces in Weatherhead that are going to be assigned to students who are not part of the honors program. So maybe that's another way to phrase it, right? So if the entire building is not necessarily specifically for honors. So if your student's not part of the honors program, there's still maybe an opportunity for them to live there. But I believe that for them to be in the RLC itself, they need to be part of the honors program.
So if space is available, if the RLC applicants don't completely fill the building, then if space was available, a student could request
it.
Okay.
Certainly.
Okay. So I think, so we're getting near the end of the questions, so I'll make a last call for questions. We've got a couple of questions that are about off-campus living. So I'm not quite sure if, I'll read out this first question and may have to have a clarification. So the question is, are there apartments available in the Garden District for rising juniors and seniors? How safe is it to live off campus? I get the crime reports and I'm worried. So the Garden District is actually a neighborhood that's a few miles away from campus. So I know sometimes people think of where we are in Uptown as the Garden District, but if you're asking about are there apartments around campus for rising juniors and seniors, there are a lot of apartments around Tulane, and there are certainly apartments, all over the city. Most of our students tend to live in kind of one of three zip codes, 70118, 70125, and 70115. Those are the ones that are closest to campus. I've done a webinar in the past on off-campus housing, and it's in the archive on the parent program's website. The information in that has not really changed very much. The only element of it that is outdated is that it also had some of the information for the previous on-campus process, dates and deadlines, in case after hearing all that information or in weighing both options, parents wanted to kind of have both things in the webinar. But if you wanted to look at that webinar in the archive, it'll give you some good information about kind of understanding the rental landscape here around campus. New Orleans is very unique in a lot of ways, and apartment living is definitely one of those things. We don't have large apartment complexes near Tulane. It's a very residential community, and so it's not as easy to look for an apartment as it might be in some other places where there's a massive apartment complex that houses 1,000 people, and you can go to the office and they'll show you a model apartment, and they'll know exactly how many spaces are coming available. It's a bit more unique, and the apartments are in things like part of a house, or a house has been divided into, like a large 2-story house has been divided into 4 or 5 apartments. Or what is very typical here in New Orleans is a typical house type is a shotgun double house, which means that there are two sides that are mirror images of each other. Or around campus we also have some duplex types, but they're usually sort of stacked one on top of the other. So the floor on the bottom, sort of like a flat. So one floor is one apartment and the other is above it. So that's what's typical. If you want more information about that whole off-campus concept and those things to think about, definitely take a look at that webinar. There's a couple of notes of questions to go through with your student to consider whether or not they're really ready for that off-campus housing experience, and some other resources. There are some local real estate agents that are listed who specialize in rentals or have some staff devoted to the rental market. There's also some other resources that we have on campus, including our Tulane Legal Assistance Program, which is a law clinic run from our law school, and they will do things like help students review a lease, to kind of look through that, so that there's somebody here who's kind of looked through that with your student. So there's some good resources that you can find in that webinar, and that PDF of the slides on the parents.tulane.edu website. And just look under the communication tab and look under webinars, and you'll find it in the webinar archive. Look in the one for 2015-16. So the next question is, would every junior or senior who wants to live on campus be able to do so?
We have to know.
It's all supply and demand.
It is.
Right,
We can't guarantee
that.
Yeah. What we can guarantee is that we're going to have housing for all of our first and second year students, because they are required to live on campus. And we'll make every effort to house our rising juniors and seniors, but that is going to be on a space available basis.
And I can say from previous years that oftentimes students will try to tell their parents that there won't be space on campus, and they'll tell you they just have to live off campus, and you may want to really investigate that because we're not telling them there's not space, and there really are a lot of options on campus and for juniors and seniors. And then sometimes we've had situations where a student didn't apply and they applied late, so they were at the very tail end of things, and they might have had to be on a wait list for the summer, but they eventually were assigned a space once other things kind of shook out. Some other people made their plans changed. But so I think that it's important that if your student is considering at all that they should submit an application, and remember that the seniors and juniors, you know, go first in the process, so they get some of the premium spots. So just really think through that with your student, and keep in mind that there are so many things that are included when you have a housing contract. You're not paying separately for electricity and water and sewerage and cable and, you know, and internet access. They will have to be responsible for all of those bills in addition to their rent, and split that with maybe 2, 3, or 4 other people. And there's a negotiation factor there, and, you know, just that's another big step. And it can be a really good next step for a lot of students in, you know, just maturing and getting more life skills. But you may want to help them think about whether that's the best thing for them. You know, if they're going to have a really intense academic year, or they know that they've just got a kind of lifestyle where they don't want to have to be cooking all their own meals. You know, all of that is just something to think about. So if you look at that, the webinar slides for the off-campus housing resources, that gives you some of those questions to consider with your student. I think that was all the questions. If we've missed one, please know that you can email housing or HRL info, either housing@tulane.edu is fine. If you have any feedback about the webinar, please email me, or if you have any comments you want to type in now, then that's good. But I always appreciate comments from parents that you send afterwards. It helps us know if we're on the right track, if you appreciate the topic, if you think this is something we should repeat every year, if you have constructive criticism. It always helps us refine what we're offering. So, you know, parent input is very, very important to me. So, so please know that. Again, by tomorrow afternoon, I'll send you the slides, and hopefully then also a link to the complete webinar. So let's see. I think that there's one question here that says that this one might have been missed. What's the process for a rising sophomore to join the honors program? Well, that would be something that we don't know the answer to, sorry. But you could talk with, the student can talk to the folks in the honors office. I know that they do have a way for students to apply to the honors program. There's different criteria that they might have to meet, but that is not something that we manage. So it would be best to hear about that from that particular office. And so you could look on the, it's probably on their website. And so if you go to the Tulane website and put honors program in the search bar at the top, you could probably find that website. But I would recommend that really the best thing would be for the student to go to the honors office and meet someone there. There's some really great staff who run that program who I think could talk to them about how to join the program as a sophomore. Okay, well, I think that's everything. So we're going to wrap up, and we're glad that we could give you this topic now. We did it, we presented this a little bit earlier than we have in the past, and someone wrote in and said that they appreciate that time to prepare. We wanted you to have this information before your student comes home for the break, so that you can have some good conversations about how this will all take place, and that you can have some input and some guidance, and that you're all on the same page about what will be happening for your student next year. So thank you very much for tuning in. We really appreciate your participation.